Welcome to Reddit family. What happens when you uncover a family secret at your father's funeral? This story's from Reddit, about a man who discovers his dad had a hidden second family, and his life changes forever. It's a tale of secrets, betrayal, and healing for anyone who's faced the unexpected. Stick around, because this one's a journey of truth you won't forget. Let's call him Robert. He's 50, a skilled carpenter from a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where the air smells like pine and the summers are filled with the sound of crickets. Robert's a quiet man, the kind who lets his work speak for him. He builds furniture by hand, the same way his dad, Henry, taught him when he was a kid. Robert was an only child, raised by Henry and his mom, Eleanor, in a modest house filled with the smell of sawdust and the hum of old country records. Henry was a truck driver, always on the road, but when he was home, he'd spend hours in the workshop with Robert, teaching him how to carve wood, how to make something that lasts. A man's legacy is in his hands, Henry used to say, his calloused fingers guiding Robert's over a piece of oak. Robert idolized his dad, even if he was gone more than he was home. Eleanor always said Henry was working hard for them, and Robert believed her. Until the day of the funeral. Henry passed away 3 months ago at 78, after a sudden heart attack. Robert was devastated. His dad had been his hero, the man who'd taught him everything he knew about craftsmanship and life. The funeral was small, held at the town's only cemetery, with a gray sky overhead and the smell of rain in the air. Eleanor stood beside Robert, her face pale but composed. Clutching a handkerchief as the pastor spoke, Robert noticed a woman he didn't recognize standing at the back, mid-40s, dark hair, with 2 kids, a boy about 12 and a girl around 8, clinging to her sides. They looked out of place, dressed in city clothes, their faces heavy with grief. Robert figured they were distant relatives or maybe co-workers of Henry's. He didn't think much of it until the service ended. As people started to leave, the woman approached, her eyes red from crying. "You must be Robert," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Clara. This is Ethan and Lily. We were Henry's family." Robert froze, the words not sinking in. "What do you mean, his family?" he asked. Clara took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she held her kids close. "Henry was my husband. Ethan and Lily are his children. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." Robert felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. His dad, his hero, had a second family. For how long? He looked at his mom, expecting her to be as shocked as he was, but Eleanor's face was unreadable, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Let's talk somewhere else," she said quietly, leading Robert and Clara to a bench under an old oak tree. Clara explained everything. She'd met Henry 20 years ago in Seattle, where he often stopped on his trucking routes. They'd started as friends, but it turned into more. Henry married her in a small ceremony 15 years ago, saying he was divorced. A lie Clara believed until she saw his obituary and realized he'd never left Eleanor. Ethan and Lily were born a few years apart, and Henry had been a part of their lives, visiting when he could, sending money, calling them on birthdays. He always said he couldn't leave his first family. Clara said, tears streaming down her face, "I didn't know he was still married. I thought he loved us." Robert's mind raced. All those times Henry was on the road, all those late nights he'd blamed on work. He'd been living a double life. Robert looked at Ethan and Lily, their faces so much like his dad's. The same hazel eyes, the same stubborn jaw. They were his half-siblings, and he'd never known they existed. The shock didn't stop there. A week after the funeral, Robert met with his dad's lawyer to go over the will. Henry had left the house and most of his savings to Eleanor, but there was a separate account, $50,000, set aside for Clara and her kids. Robert felt a surge of anger. That money could have gone to his mom, who'd spent her life scrimping and saving, or to Robert, who'd been helping with her medical bills since her arthritis got worse. He dug deeper, going through Henry's old records in the attic. He found bank statements showing regular transfers to a Seattle account, thousands of dollars over the years. Money Henry had claimed was for truck repairs or business expenses. Robert remembered the times he'd asked his dad for help, like when his workshop needed a new roof, or when he'd wanted to take Eleanor on a rare vacation. Henry always said he didn't have the cash to spare. Now Robert knew why. He sat in the attic, surrounded by dusty boxes, feeling like the man he'd idolized had been a stranger. He thought about the workbench they'd built together when he was 12, the one still in his shop, carved with their initials, H&R. Had any of it been real? For weeks, Robert wrestled with what to do. Part of him wanted to cut Clara and her kids out of his life. They were a reminder of his dad's betrayal, a betrayal that cut deeper than anything he'd ever felt. But another part of him couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and Lily. They were just kids, caught in a mess they didn't create, and they'd lost their dad. 2. Robert's best friend, Mike, who'd been through his own family drama, told him, "You don't have to decide today, but if you don't face this, it'll eat you alive." So Robert reached out to Clara, asking to meet in Seattle. He drove up on a rainy Saturday, his stomach in knots, and met them at a small diner near their apartment. Clara was nervous, apologizing again for how he'd found out. Ethan and Lily were shy at first, but when Robert asked if they liked building things, Ethan's face lit up. "Dad taught me how to make a birdhouse once," he said. "It's still in our backyard." Robert smiled, a lump in his throat. "He taught me that, too." Over the next few months, Robert started building a relationship with Ethan and Lily. He'd drive up to Seattle once a month, bringing tools and wood, teaching them how to carve like Henry had taught him. It wasn't easy. Every time he saw them, he was reminded of his dad's double life, the years of lies, but he also saw Henry and their laughter, their curiosity, the way Ethan sanded a piece of wood with the same focus Robert had at that age. Clara shared stories about Henry that Robert had never heard, how he'd sing off key to make the kids laugh, how he'd always bring them little trinkets from his trips. It painted a picture of a man who'd loved both families, even if he'd failed them both in different ways. Robert also had hard conversations with his mom. Eleanor admitted she'd suspected Henry was hiding something for years. The late nights, the excuses, but she'd never confronted him, too afraid of what she'd find. "I didn't want to lose him," she said, her voice breaking. Robert held her hand, realizing how much she'd carried alone. It's been a year since Henry's funeral, and Robert's life looks different now. He's not angry anymore. Not at Clara, not at Ethan and Lily, not even at his dad. He's chosen to forgive, not because Henry deserved it, but because Robert deserved peace. He still visits Seattle, bringing Ethan and Lily to his workshop sometimes, teaching them the craft Henry loved. Last month, they built a bookshelf together, carving their initials into the back, R, E, and L. It felt like a new legacy, one built on truth, not secrets. Robert's also started opening up more to his mom, taking her to the coast for the vacation they never got to have when Henry was alive. They sat on the beach, watching the waves, and Eleanor said, "Your dad wasn't perfect, but he gave me you. That's enough." Robert smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Some nights, he still thinks about the workbench in his shop, the one with H&R carved into it. It used to feel like a lie, but now it's a reminder of the good, the bad, and the complicated man who'd shaped him. Robert's story shows what happens when a family secret turns your world upside down, and how you can find healing on the other side. He uncovered a truth that broke his heart, but he built something new from the pieces. Sometimes, the hardest truths lead to the greatest growth. What do you think? Should Robert have reached out to his half-siblings, or kept his distance? Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. These stories connect us, showing us we're not alone in our struggles. If you enjoyed this tale, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. I'm here every day with new tales from Reddit and beyond, so stick around. See you next time.